Nuclear war. Numerous times, perhaps too many to carefully count, the world's population has feared for its continuation due to the presence of weapons of mass destruction, a state that goes on today as certain nations struggle against each other to gain supremacy in a game that was probably rigged from the start. Some of the very people that created the bomb publicly shed tears at its deployment, as everyone who knew what they were talking about agreed that history had been split into two parts. The time before nuclear warfare was possible, and the time after. Never before had humanity been able to so thoroughly destroy itself, been so close to complete and total annihilation. And this is more true now than ever before, with more nuclear-armed countries coming to the fore. But one man thought we weren't going far enough. One man saw the terrible destruction wrought by the nuclear bomb and said to himself, "Nice! I want to make that the American standard issue." This is Douglas MacArthur. Douglas MacArthur was awesome. World War I and World War II veteran, Medal of Honor recipient, 5-star general, planner of the post-war economic miracle, and supreme commander for the Allied forces. He who did return. A military brat born in 1880 in Little Rock, Arkansas, the youngest of 3 to another Medal of Honor recipient, little Douglas is a bit of a contradiction to read about for the time. On one hand, he stated in his memoirs that he learned to ride and shoot almost before he learned to walk and talk. On the other hand, he followed his mother around in skirts and wore his hair in long curls until he was about 8 years old. However, as he grew up to go to school, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that Douglas MacArthur was going places. He played tennis, quarterbacked the football team, and shortstopped the baseball team. He got awards for academic merit and graduated valedictorian before eventually going on to enroll in West Point Naval Academy in 1899, where he was responsible in 1901 for a testimony that would go on to get the rules changed to crack down on hazing and humiliating new students, something that had gotten so bad that it had led to the death of one of MacArthur's own friends. He left school with the 3rd highest academic merit score ever recorded at the time in West Point history, and graduated top of his class, a true American son commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant in the United States Army Corps of Engineers. After serving in World War I, MacArthur would go on to serve as superintendent for West Point Military Academy, creating a radical reform that would go on to eventually be restored after he left his role as superintendent. He had some kids, settled down a bit, and tried to figure things out right in time to be made the U.S. Army's youngest major general at the age of 44 in 1925. By 1930, he was chief of staff, the sort of man that we envision when we think about him today. Cigar smoking, big on public relations, inclined to go home at lunch every day to see his mother, but also a big sort of man with a big sort of attitude. This was the time he started officially referring to himself as MacArthur. During this time, he was responsible for fast-tracking the B-17 and the M1 Garand, and when the Philippines would achieve semi-independence in 1935, MacArthur would be personally asked to help supervise the creation of its army, within which he was granted the rank of Field Marshal and given proper rank and payment to suit his station. He would go on to lead the defense of the Philippines in 1941 against the Japanese Empire, and in his famous retreat from the Philippines, he would say, "I shall return." And on the 20th of October, 1944, at just over an hour past noon during the Battle of Leyte, MacArthur would go on to make a speech wherein he would issue the statement, "People of the Philippines, I have returned. By the grace of Almighty God, our forces stand again on Philippine soil." And from there he would go on to retake the island from over 70,000 Japanese defenders, and then move on to help America win the Pacific Theater. At some point thereafter, the war ended and MacArthur got really interested in nuclear weapons. He wanted to dig a nuclear trench along the border of Korea and China to keep out the communists. He wanted to put nukes at every Air Force base abroad, just in case we needed to drop a few on anyone that looked a little too much like an enemy to the good old US of A. He loved nuclear weapons, and wanted to make the idea of nuclear warfare a bit more conventional. But fortunately for the entire world, he was never able to put his nuclear plans into motion. However, what if, in an alternate timeline, Douglas MacArthur got his way? What if Douglas MacArthur made nuclear bombs standard issue. First, a little context to investigate where our timeline could have changed. For those of you who didn't know, MacArthur almost became our president. One of the most publicly known generals of the war, a Medal of Honor recipient from an already established Gold Star family, and an all-around badass in the eyes of the American public, Douglas MacArthur was very interested in running as the Republican candidate in 1944, but felt like he had to return to the Philippines as he had vowed before becoming president. Even then, Republicans tried to put his name on the ballot, but instead New York Governor Thomas E. Dewey got the candidacy, losing to FDR in the Electoral College with an embarrassing 432 to 99 point loss. In this timeline, MacArthur instead decides to go forward with his ambitions of presidency. Already popular, attractive, and accomplished in the eyes of the American public, MacArthur resigns from his military position and runs for Republican primary, gets the candidacy, and becomes president in a close but fair election against Franklin D. Roosevelt. First and foremost, we shouldn't think that World War II would go terribly much different. By 1944, the Axis was already on its way out, and the only question is if MacArthur can do it faster. For the sake of the scenario, let's say he can't. World War II plays out remarkably the same as it did in our timeline, and eventually the German Chancellor, we're not allowed to name, directly did the thing to himself that we're not allowed to talk about verbally, and the bombs got dropped on Japan, leading to their surrender against the United States in 1945, just like in our timeline. Great! Now that we got that out of the way, the real meat of things. You see, MacArthur saw Hiroshima and Nagasaki and was really stoked about what it could mean for future conflicts. Nukes, man. He was all about nukes. The totality of the nuclear bomb was something that, in his mind, could either create an invulnerable trench to defend, or a tool of complete and total annihilation of the enemy. But unlike some other generals, MacArthur wasn't as sold on rockets and missiles. That was German science right there, and had been nothing but a symbol of terror and destruction for the Americans. MacArthur put his trust in people, in tanks, planes, artillery, and ships, and the people serving on them. So he would have wanted a more portable type scenario. Now, we want to direct you and your attention to the Davy Crockett nuclear weapons system. First tested in 1961, this pint-sized nuke had about 20 tons of TNT to it, with a 4-kilometer firing range. Just short of a nuclear-armed bazooka, it's this sort of technology that would surely be working in the mind of now President Douglas MacArthur. Man, portable, easy to move around, with a slim profile and the opportunity for updating as technology could be developed. Don't get us wrong, the Davy Crockett that Primeline knows was first tested in 1961, but in a world where MacArthur had the position to make it happen, we might see the idea moved up well over a decade. You see, MacArthur liked nukes just about as much as he hated communism. With the National Security Act of 1947, America was tasked with coming up with a plan to strike Russia and the rest of the communist bloc in 1948 with nuclear bombs. It was very much an idea to nuke a trench across the Chinese border to avoid them crossing it, while everything from Moscow to Beijing might well be burned up in nuclear fire. Operations Broiler and Bushwhacker, as history came to call them, would have had America attacking in 1948 and 1952 respectively. In this timeline, we'll be investigating Operation Broiler more closely for reasons we'll get into later. Operation Broiler, and a later alteration called Operation Frolic, involved the dropping of 34 nuclear bombs on 24 separate Russian cities, including but not limited to 7 on the city of Moscow alone. Ultimately, while approved as an emergency measure, there were several doubts as to the efficacy of Broiler. They didn't have as many bombs as they thought, they had very few planes capable of carrying nukes and making the journey to their targets and back, and the idea of using nuclear weapons so freely didn't sit well with most of the American military. It was entirely in question whether or not America could even project into Russia through the screen of Russian air defense and interceptor craft. Long story short, it was logistically unsound for the time, and there was every reason to assume that the money required for the project to be a success simply wasn't there, and the administrations in charge were not willing to change things around for it. In this timeline, with a more hawkish MacArthur administration willing to pour more money into nuclear miniaturization, man-portable alternatives, and perhaps even a fast track of a predecessor to the B-52, this becomes a more realistic option. We aren't going to say that everything would be ready, but Operation Broiler in this alternate timeline is not the emergency plan, but the first plan, only to be discarded if it is deemed insufficient at the word go. And, in order to stop the oncoming tide of communism, the master of PR that was MacArthur convinced the American people and Congress at large that it was time to go back to war against Stalin and Mao. Against the communist threat for America! Set back up by his own administration to be stronger than ever, Fortress Japan has already been rebuilt into a staging ground for America. Greenland is taken, whether it likes it or not, as a strategic listening post in the Arctic to watch out for Russian incursion, and test cold weather aircraft capable of delivering nuclear weapons over the poles and into Soviet territory. In the opening of the war, after his second election in 1948 was properly secured, Douglas MacArthur gave the Communist bloc an ultimatum. Cease your economic model, retire it, liberate your people, and enter into the world of free market capitalism, or stand ready to receive the power that capitalism can bring to bear against its enemies. Naturally, neither Stalin nor Mao are cowed by this saber-rattling, so on January 1st, 1949, the United States carries out Operation Frolic, the updated Operation Boiler Plan. Already stationed in Japan and Korea, Germany and France, American soldiers with man-portable precursors to the Davy Crockett nuclear weapons system stand ready and waiting for the coming advance. Everyone knows that this New Year's celebration will be one to remember, one where the West's resolution is to create a world without communism. Now, if you'll excuse us, we got a thing to plug. Welcome back, attractive and well-educated watchers! Welcome back, attractive and well-educated watchers. Welcome back, attractive and well-educated watchers! Welcome back, attractive and well-educated watchers. Blah, 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 blah. Voice track, voice track, voice track, voice track, voice track! Ah! It's like doing all sorts of stupid voices for attention on the internet. My God! Unnecessary noises with mock Sean Connery voice.
Furry bits! Oh no! Don't do it! No! Please don't!
Oh, you Colin Short, you wee bastard! Don't make me take you down to my level, tear your throat out with my own paws!
In the city of your decay, there I shall be. Today shall be the last day that you live on this earth.
Remember to support Uncle Sam in the coming war effort by making sure to farm plenty of eggs and chickens. Remember next month to get in contact with your local agrarian university to make sure that you plant your victory gardens on time.
I have lived longer than all of your progenitors combined. I have surpassed the age of your entire collective genetic line. But worry not, for I am not here to bring upon you horrors and war. I am here as your savior. I am here to protect the holy race of humankind.
I wouldn't want to hang out with people who are beneath my station. That sounds unmanly. Instead, how about we head down to the gym, snort about 5 gallons of protein powder, do about 600 curls, and then go and hang out at the juice bar until morning. Oh yeah, come on, buddy.
Oh, don't listen to that guy there, brother. You just gotta go all natty, hang out in the community, take it easy, take it slow, but go forward with your progress, brother. Oh yeah, let's get ourselves together after work, go on down, get a little run out, and then relax for the rest of the day. You just take it easy, friend.
Record numbers of award-winning scientists are telling us that there are billions and billions of stars in the galaxy. billions and billions of stars. Altogether, the stars in the galaxy number in the billions and billions.
No, I think you're miscategorizing what I've been saying. No, actually, that's just a straw man, and I take great offense to that. Now, you see, I've recently read all of this person's books from start to finish, and I think I have a better understanding of everything that they say than you could ever imagine.
If you liked what you heard here today, remember to go to the Patreon and pledge even just $1 a month. Or alternatively, try to come and commission us. Commission us now! Give us your money.
Alright, so let's consider how this horrifying nuclear war would play out. The first Russian nuclear test hadn't yet been carried out, so it's safe to say that this will not result in mutually assured destruction. Even if we can assume that the test would carry on at the exact same time as in our timeline, that still leaves over 6 months of unrestricted nuclear blasting that the United States gets to lord over the Soviet Union. But let's also not assume that the USA gets everything exactly as they want. Their planes can't make the journey back, so the best air crews have is to try and fly back to the closest bases and bail out before they run out of fuel. Some, particularly those in deeper territories like Moscow, will ultimately have to accept the fact that they are giving their lives for freedom. And that doesn't even cover the hilarious amounts of losses from air defenses or the fact that this means that there will be little bits of uranium and plutonium showering down on the wilderness of the Soviet Union, poisoning the land for generations to come. While it's impossible to say exactly how well the initial bombardments will go, in this scenario, we're going to opt with the more, middle ground take. Roughly half of the planes, around 50 or so, will be shot down or otherwise unable to make their targets, dropping their bombs prematurely on whatever targets are available to avoid being captured and still having the bombs getting into Soviet hands. But that's still enough left to hit Moscow several times and turn other Russian cities to glass. No sooner do the first bombs fall do the coalition forces at the border begin to move, artillery refit to hold nuclear munitions, and send them up to 10 miles downrange, while infantry groups carry smaller, shorter-range Davy Crockett analogs in every company. Heedless of the radiation that was, at the time, still very poorly understood, American soldiers march across the Soviet border, eager and ready to use these new, extra-powerful bombs to drive a mighty wedge into the communist landscape. On the Pacific coast, American soldiers that have set up in Japan and Korea push into the Russian and Chinese territories, using these brand new munitions to deliver untold destruction on the Reds. January 1st, 1950. 1 year later. What was once the Soviet Union and People's Republic of China now lies in nuclear ruin. Millions lie dead, tens of millions more irradiated, sick, and dying. Select pockets of China and the Soviet Union stand completely uninhabitable, while American soldiers begin to go home complaining of fatigue, weakness, headaches, and gut problems. In a decade, they'll either be dead or riddled with cancer. The capitalist world rejoices at the destruction of communism and all of its horrible practices, turning to the now fractured land in hopes that it might one day recover what was lost. Just like the post-war economic miracle, it is thought that the formerly communist landscape will be easy to clean up and even easier to rebuild. But it is not so. Hiroshima and Nagasaki's bombs exploded roughly half a kilometer above ground, and over cities like Moscow and Leningrad and Stalingrad, this remains the case. But the smaller Davy Crockett analogs and artillery-launched nuclear shells detonated barely 50 meters above ground, causing dangerous fallout in high-conflict areas that takes decades to clean up, and several feet of land to be scraped off of the surface and hidden away. Very quickly, the world comes to the conclusion that MacArthur's ideas were, in fact, not the best thing for the war effort. They destroyed communism and preserved the US military hegemony over the rest of the world at large, ensuring that no competing power ever got access to the bomb. Yet, it was at the expense of all of the land communism ever owned. Pockmarked with nuclear residue, MacArthur's legacy would become the communist cleanup. an ongoing, generations-long endeavor to scrape back the topsoil from Siberia, Korea, China, and various republics of the former Soviet Union and bury the irradiated debris in a great storage facility in Antarctica, several hundred feet below ground, to be gradually filled in the safest way possible before being sealed off forever. But, even worse, humanity didn't learn its lesson. For, into the modern day, warfare is not a conventional affair. It's a nuclear one. Updated to offset fallout and using systems designed to detonate at higher altitudes to avoid dangerous radiation, nuclear munitions only get more advanced, more high-tech, more precise. And America, at every opportunity, will use that to its advantage. Especially considering that, without the president of a president that was elected for a 4th term, it is entirely possible that Douglas MacArthur would have found the chance to get a 3rd or even 4th term based on his charisma, reputation, and patriotic attitude. Going into the 21st century, we do not see a multipolar world, but rather a unipolar world where the United States of America acts as judge, jury, and executioner over all those who would seek to go against world peace and poke the Leviathan. Nuclear bombs, now a perfected science, would be used liberally on any perceived threat, and their land taken by Western coalitions that approved of the use of nuclear force in the first place. In this alternate timeline, America truly wins. But, in his zeal to settle every dispute and overthrow every status quo in exchange for global American hegemony, Douglas MacArthur has made the world into a highly polluted, mildly irradiated wasteland with a thin sheet of radioactive glass spread over select conflict zones. While fewer nuclear weapons have been detonated in this alternate timeline than our own, remembering, of course, that thousands of bombs have been exploded just for the sake of testing in Primeline, and certainly no nuclear weapon ever reaches the destructive potential of, say, the Tsar Bomba, nuclear weapons have become a normalized phenomenon. And only the USA gets to use them. Segregated into the Great Plains, the world nuclear stockpile becomes functionally limitless, and, stuck with this complete monopoly on weapons of mass destruction, America, King of the Ashes, looks to the stars to see if there might be a solution there. But what would bring us to the stars in this timeline, if not for nuclear bombs? And so, that terrifying 50s dream becomes reality, and the great nuclear stockpile is eventually aimed toward use in spaceflight. Thanks for watching the video. We know it's a bit shorter than most of the videos that we've gotten on this channel so far, but it's mostly because nuclear war is not a prolonged or deeply detailed affair. Going through the research for this setting, we found that there was a lot of, and then they got nuked by America, and that's that. Just as in our own timeline, America would have a continued vested interest to ensure that no other nation has the capacity to recreate that nuclear monopoly that the USA has secured. And while there would certainly be a lot of conflicts in politics, global hegemony has been secured. Get 100 likes on this video for us, and we'll consider a space race nuclear pulse timeline that follows this one up. Thanks a bunch for coming, everybody. Yeah, if you liked what you saw here today, remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, go on down to our Patreon via that Linktree link in the description. Pledge even just $1 a month to our to there to, you know, help support this channel and all the other things we do, and get your name in the end of everything. Yeah. Thanks a bunch for coming, everybody. Stay safe, stay inside, stay healthy, and of course remember to help each other. And remember, vote Bull Moose.